Hey, what's up, nerds? Paul Conti here, and we are back for take 2 of this video. I tried recording this morning, and, you know, I was like half asleep, so I played it back for myself at work before I posted it up. I was like, this is hot garbage. This is fucking terrible. I can do better. So, here we go. Take 2, little more energy, little more feeling. And I want to bring conversation back around to free people. It's something that I kind of kept on the shelf a little bit for a while recently, and there's been an interesting kind of spark of discussion that I've seen starting to happen. I've seen some discussions on Twitter. Rob from Honest Wargamer just did a pretty deep dive video on it. I was just on Warhammer Weekly talking about it, and I've seen some other discussions around the community about free people and what the level of competitiveness actually is, how to build lists, what things are good, and, you know, kind of coming back and revisiting the army now after I've been, for the last several months, really just playing Stormcast and really trying to learn that army. I've come away and really learned a whole bunch of valuable things that I think are really applicable to the free people. And it kind of starts with the idea that I think Stormcast and free people are very similar armies in a lot of ways. If you take away like the poster child factor of Stormcast, that they just get a lot of releases, they have a higher, like, there's more heroes available, there's more prayers, there's, you know, there's a wider model range for them right now than you have for free people. But the basic concept is basically the same, is that it's a combined arms force. And Stormcast are like an elite version of it, and the free people are the horde version of it. And, you know, so two sides of the same coin, I think. And some of their abilities really kind of cross over and are either similar or exactly the same between the two armies. So I've been playing, you know, the Vanguard wing list a lot, and that has taught me some really interesting things, because if you look at what Vanguard wing does, it basically takes a maximum size block of Liberators and gives them a whole bunch of defensive buffs, so they're on 2-up rerollable saves, and the battalion gives them some offensive buffs, but not anything really that crazy, and your general also gives them a +1 to hit buff, and you might get off blessed weapons from a Relictor as well. 50-50 shot at that, right? So that does add some extra punch. But in general, I mean, Liberators are good, but they're kind of a pillow fight a lot of the time. Even in those large of numbers, I was finding that your Grand Hammers are doing all the work. You know, your 1 in every 5 guys that can take the big hammer, those are really doing the majority of the work in that unit. And everything else is just kind of throwing pillows around for the most part. You're getting damage through just on law of large numbers more than them actually being any good. But what I learned was really interesting, right? So Vanguard wing, run in that way, you have a very, very tanky unit that is at maximum size. So you're getting the horde discount. So it's cheaper than usual. It has, in the case of Vanguard wing in particular, it's a 60 wound unit that you are very easily putting on a 2-up rerollable save. And what I will tell you is that in general, that shit does not go anywhere. Unless you run into a lot of Rend 2, or a lot of mortal wounds, those guys aren't dying. And that really has taken me to an interesting place, because the comparison that I always make between Free People and Stormcast is that your battle line units are really comparable. Your Free Guild Guard with Sword and Shield are, you know, for your minimum unit size, you're getting a 10 wound unit that has a 4-up save, re-rolling 1s, and your other abilities throughout your army give it, you know, resistance to battle shock. You know, with the Vanguard Wing list, you run the Pennant of Sigmaron on your Relictor to give them battle shock resistance, and that really helps them stick around a lot more when they do take some losses. And for Free People, you've got the combination of your general, your battle traits, and the ability on the banners of all of your infantry that let you ignore battle shock if you roll a 1 on battle shock. So 2d6, take the lowest, re-rolling, and ignoring battle shock on 1s gets you to ignore battle shock 80% of the time, roughly speaking. And that's really strong. And, you know, similarly, you have similar kinds of numbers basically on what the Pennant of Sigmaron is giving you. So we're looking at, you know, 2 different similar concepts hanging out in the same general sphere, right? You've got, if you take 2 maximum size units of Free Guild Guard with Sword and Shield, it comes out to 560 points. Maximum size unit of Liberators is 520 points. So we're at comparable point levels, and your Free Guild Guard, you're getting 80 wounds of that versus the 60 wounds of that you're getting out of your Liberators, and comparably, you know, same number of attacks. They're attacks equal to wounds, roughly. So for like 10 or 15% more in cost, you're getting, you know, like 30-35% more effectiveness on the battlefield, which is really interesting. It's split between 2 units instead of just in 1. But when we look at our Free Guild Great Companies, what do we have there? Well, in order to take a Great Company, you have to take a unit of Guard, minimum 20. Well, we've got 2 units of Guard that are at 40. So that forms a really strong core of 2 Great Companies. You back up each of them with some solid shooting. Hey, look, Vanguard Wing also running some solid shooting. Given Vanguard Wing is much longer range shooting. But, you know, you back it up with 2 units of 20 handgunners. Now you've got some decent shooting power behind that, and you've got room in each of those Great Companies for 1 more unit. And whatever that 1 more unit is, I really haven't figured that combination out yet. But I'm really kind of hooked on this idea right now that the way that we run Free Guild going forward, I think, is going to be taking a lot off of these lessons that I've learned from playing Stormcast. That if you have large immovable objects, it's very difficult for your opponent to deal with. You take up large areas of the board, so it makes it difficult for them to move around. You, just on sheer number of attacks, you're getting a decent amount of damage through. In the case of Free People, then you're also triggering handgunners to have the ability to shoot every turn instead of just on your own turn. So it's a really interesting, compelling combination to me. And when we start looking at how does this match up against the other tier 1 armies that are out there, just kind of off the tops of our heads, what's the strength, what's the weakness? The big strength in general is against any opposing army that is really melee based. I think it's incredibly strong because you have these 2 giant 40 wound anvils that are going to just absorb hits from your opponent, and then they're going to be able to hit back, and you're going to light them up with handgunners. So it kind of develops that same sort of like rock, paper, scissors sort of matchups that, you know, a lot of the other tier 1 armies have. You know, Caradhran Overlords, really good in general, really weak to certain other forces. Like, if they get rushed across the battlefield and all of their guys, like all of their Arcanaut company get wiped out, or a lot of their Arcanaut company get wiped out before they really get a chance to get off a lot of light skyhook shots. You know, then you're able to sort of divide and conquer on the Endrin Riggers. You know, they're definitely weak to certain forces. Murder Host, you know, it's a glass cannon, and if you get that glass cannon to be effective, it's great, but a whole bunch of bloodletters are not going to stick around very long against a 40 buffed up handgunners. They're just going to get ripped apart by those really, really quickly. You're going to end up with, you know, demons taking, like, failing battle shock tests. That's just an unheard of sort of thing to have happen. You know, Fire Slayers, Iron Jaws, you know, Stormcast, like all of these very heavy melee oriented armies, I think this is pretty effective against, because it really takes advantage of being a good counter to the strengths of those armies. Are you going to have problems with Caradhran Overlords? Yes. Are you going to have problems with Siege? Yes. But any of those lists, they have their own opposing list archetype that is its kryptonite. So, you know, if you happen to show up at a tournament and you just don't face any Tzeentch and you don't face any KO, I mean, could you go 5-0 at a GT with a free guild force? I mean, maybe. It's interesting. Like, that was a really bold statement that, you know, Rob had made on The Honest Wargamer. And I'll link to that conversation below. That, you know, that because of this sort of ability to just counter these really popular, powerful lists, it kind of has that value in itself. How well would it do against a quote-unquote fair list, or a balanced list, or an all-comers list? I mean, who knows? That's sort of left yet to be seen, and I think you might be able to build in certain things into a list that might help. There's a lot of options out there, and I really want to start diving more deeply into really looking at free people in a competitive way, because I think the potential is really there. I think what's lacking is people with free people armies that contain the models necessary for building a competitive list. I think it's just not there, because I think one of the really big linchpins of their list design right now is running 40 to 80 swordsmen. And I mean, who the hell has those? You know, maybe you had those kind of numbers of state troops from 8th edition, but they were all modeled as halberdiers, because people weren't running swordsmen for the most part. You know? So it really puts you in this kind of weird position that I think the army isn't getting played that much, because the more optimal ways to play it, I think people just don't own the models. And even if they own the models, maybe they're sitting in a box, maybe they are unpainted. I mean, I've been putting together some lists that are like 200 infantry models. That takes a big commitment to paint. You know, people complain about painting 120, 150 bloodletters for a murder host list, and those guys you can basically, you know, base, wash, dry brush complete for the most part. And your Free Guild Guard take a long time to paint, and especially with the typical paint schemes that kind of go along with that faction in general, the common paint schemes of, you know, multicolored quartered designs, you know, from all of the old Empire provinces. It definitely takes a long time to paint, and everybody's got armor in little bags and banners and little scrolls on their shields and ribbons and fucking pantaloons everywhere. They're detailed models, and they're like shitty footslogger infantry low point models that take forever to paint. And so I think not a lot of people really have them, so people haven't been putting them on the table in a competitive way. I'm seeking to change that. I've got 30 swordsmen painted. I've got 50 more assembled that are hitting the painting table this weekend. I'm going to start trying to paint them up this weekend. I've got some more handgunners to do. And then I still have this sort of question mark of, like, what is the rest of this list? Like, I get what the core is, right? You run 2 great companies, each with 20 handgunners and 40 swordsmen and question mark. You run a Free Guild General with Indomitable, so everybody's on a 3-up reroll 1 save. You run some wizard somewhere to give guys Mystic Shield. And other than that, you know, what other units go in? Do you run demigryphs out on the flanks? Do you run great swords? Do you run a horde of great swords? Is it just too unwieldy to have that many great swords in one unit? Because, I mean, a unit of 10 great swords, when they charge and they attack first, they just delete stuff. You know, griffins. How many griffins do you run? I mean, I have seen discussion of people running 3 or 4 griffins in a list, in a 2,000-point list. And considering 4 griffins is only about 1,000 points, it is not unreasonable, you know? I'm not sure I personally would go above 2 for my own playstyle, but, I mean, it's tempting. So that's kind of where my thoughts are on this right now. The lessons learned from playing Stormcast, playing Vanguard Wing, seeing a lot more top tier lists in action and saying, okay, if I were to take what I have available to me in Free Guild and I try and build out a competitive list that can actually effectively deal with all of these things being thrown around by top tier armies, what level of effectiveness do I actually have? And I think it may be a lot higher than people are giving it credit for. And I just don't think people, again, I think people just don't have enough of the models in their collection to make it happen. And I am now, like, damn determined to make it happen, because I feel like the potential is there. It just needs to actually hit the table and be proven. So, and for myself, I have not played a single game with free people since GHB 2017, and a big part of the reason why is, you know, out of my painted models, I lost like 2,500 points of Bretonians that I had painted up to the compendium falling out. I lost like, I don't know, 1,500 points of painted stuff out of what used to be the Empire, all fell out into the compendium. And now, because we have the allegiance restrictions, you know, all of the stuff that I have out of Ironweld Arsenal and Collegiate Arcane, you know, and even Stormcast Eternals, really, because I think Stormcast have a lot of viable things to be allying in. You've only got 400 points of room. And so you've got to fill up 1,600 points out of a pretty slim number of War Scrolls. And realistically, a battalion that doesn't do anything. That really is no good. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm curious what other people have to say. I'm trying to find people to have kind of a roundtable discussion about free people. So if anybody out there is interested in potentially getting on, you know, kind of a paint-a-sode sort of roundtable discussion about free people and really taking a deep dive on it, feel free, hit me up here in the comments, on Twitter, wherever that you happen to be able to find me. And I'm definitely curious to see what other people are thinking about this right now, because I'm really kind of in this mental place where I'm like, I went from I don't even know if this army is playable anymore to, oh my god, this may actually be a tier 1 army if you get the right things on the table. So I feel like I need to flesh out a lot more ideas and talk to a lot more people about that. So hit me up in the comments on Twitter, Facebook, wherever I may be found. Come bonk me on the head at a local gaming store. Yeah, definitely want to have the discussion, and I think this is potentially an army that we can really flesh out into something that is really competitive, like really competitive. So yeah, more to come. I'll talk to you all later.